Hi, I'm Mark Small. It's Civil Discourse Now. It's September 5th, 2022. This is Labor Day. This past weekend, some brave souls marched downtown in Indianapolis. Well, they're heavily armed. And they're wearing masks. And they're parading basically to oppose the rights of people to vote. Let's look at who they were. Let's see. Oh, they're white supremacists. When has this happened before in Indiana? 100 years ago. The Nats of the Ku Klux Klan were very strong here in Indiana. I've spoken before about the KKK being here. And when they were here before, their grand dragon was D.C. Stevenson. Now, Stevenson had come in here from Texas, and here is what Indiana faced at the time. Indiana was economically devastated after World War I. And it's like, why would Indiana be devastated after World War I? Well, Herbert Hoover had been Secretary of Agriculture. Right before we went into the war that Woodrow Wilson said we wouldn't enter, got that one wrong. Hoover was Secretary of Agriculture, and he had to worry about providing food to United States forces overseas. The most recent experience that the United States had with supplies of food for troops from United States, remember, capitalism is a great system, from the owners of agribusiness concerns, was the Spanish-American War, when troops died because meat packers saw a chance to dump a whole bunch of spoiled product they wouldn't be able to sell otherwise on the United States Army. Now, you'd think that would kind of send a message to somebody, and it did. And that was a good thing. Should have seen some prosecutions there. There weren't, because we're all rich people, and they had made decisions for the best of their industry and their bottom line. So World War I comes up. Well, if you've ever seen East of Eden with James Dean, in that movie, he wants to try and make money to replace the money his dad had lost, trying to develop a way of like chilling foods. So he talked to a guy who was into investments for agriculture, who said, war's coming up. Beans don't spoil. Invest in beans. Okay, well, Hoover did that, only it wasn't so simple. See, right around the time World War I was being fought, agriculture was being mechanized. So you could do a whole bunch more land with a tractor than you could with a horse. So farmers had lost value on their lands because they didn't have to have that grazing land anymore. All those teams of horses that would work on a farm across the country, well, they weren't necessary if you had a tractor, because one tractor could replace that team of horses and that plow, only do like a whole bunch more land. The farmer would make more money, but the land wasn't as valuable for grazing. So farmers borrowed on the land. They used the land as collateral, and they bought equipment. And Herbert Hoover, as Secretary of Agriculture, sought and obtained a boost in agricultural prices so that people would be encouraged to grow these crops. So beans were grown, things are going fine. The United States, because, and that's another thing about World War I, see, not long into the war, like the Germans and the British and the French on the other side, during Christmas, they stopped fighting and reached a de facto truce. People were exchanging gifts in no man's land between the trenches. And the leaders of the countries didn't want to see that happen. They did not want to see peace break out. So several years go by, and people continued to be kind of forced to fight, except the commanding officers found it more difficult to give orders. Like one British commander, when informed that 20,000 men had been slaughtered in an assault on an offensive, said, "Send 30,000." Because machine guns didn't understand what the generals were saying. Machine guns were just mowing people down, as they do today, well, no longer on battlefields, in public schools. But that's a different story. So the war is dragging on. The United States saw a significant increase in our gross national product because of the war, because we were selling stuff to both sides. War's good for business. We were selling away, letting people buy from us. And we sold to both sides, whereas more heavily toward the British and French. But things started going sour for us because the war started damaging the economies of the countries that would otherwise buy stuff from us. So what to do? A big problem they're having on the fronts was that the British and the French soldiers and the German soldiers wouldn't charge at each other because they thought it was really stupid at this point. Not so the American soldiers. They hadn't been in fighting before. So United States soldiers were sent over as fresh meat, unlike the meat that was sent by the Packers as food in the Spanish-American War. We had fresh meat that we sent on the fronts. Those people were mown down. It was a bloody, terrible, stupid war. But the United States, because we had all these people we threw into the mess, helped the Allies, the French and the British, defeat the Germans. War's over, so it didn't need beans anymore. So stopped price supports for beans and other commodities. All of a sudden, those farmers who had taken out loans to buy equipment to be able to provide products for the battlefield, for the war, couldn't make any money like they were making. Banks didn't know the difference. Banks were sitting there going, "Want our money? Where is it? Don't have it? Too bad." They'd sell the farms. They did it. That's capitalism, except it's not really capitalism with large corporations. They enjoy the profits and everybody else has to support them. So people came home who had been in the war. Some had lost limbs, eyes, had horrible things happen in battle, and then they're losing their land. You can't get jobs. And that was about 1920, what it was like in Indiana. And that was really basically, Indiana didn't have a good economy all the way up to World War II. They talk about the roaring 20s in other places. There might have been a few pockets in Indiana where that was the case, but for the most part, this state suffered really heavy economic losses and devastation because people couldn't make money and they lost everything they had. So what do you have then? You have the head of the Klan recruiting people in Indiana, and people are marching around blaming other people for what's happening to them. Now these guys who are marching were invoking Christianity and were blaming a lot of other people for what had happened to them. They blamed Jews, they blamed blacks, they blamed Catholics. Klan was anti-Catholic. Blamed a whole bunch of others, and they had a lot of support in this state. And to say they had a lot of support actually is to say that a couple of 100,000 people in this state belonged to the Ku Klux Klan. It was a dominant, venomous thing. So we'd had experience with the Klan before. The only reason the Klan lost power was in 1925 D.C. Stevenson was prosecuted and then convicted for homicide. He bit a woman over 200 times, raped her. And if that had happened today and had been Donald Trump, people would have said, well, what's so wrong about that? Hillary's emails, you know? But back then, people still had a semblance of morality. So these yahoos marching downtown here in Indianapolis, people need to take heed. They're chicken. They won't show their faces, and they carry guns. Now, some dumb bastard, I'll say that, dumb bastard, went on to a podcast I was on the other night and said, well, I can carry my gun into the voting place because I need it. No, you don't, you dumb bastard. In history, racists here in the United States, white racists carry guns into polling places to scare Black people away so that they wouldn't vote. So this movie is played before. It's a really bad one, and we can't tolerate it in this country. You want to say, own the libs. We're going to own the libs because we're showing up with guns. And we are taught, libs, to be polite, be concise, intelligent in what we say. And don't say, well, there are mass knifings. Yeah, there's a mass knifing this weekend. There are a bunch of people who carried it out, and you can't carry out as many killings as you can with an automatic weapon. But, oh, you really own us on anything, and really you don't. So people who are voting, I'm a candidate, Indiana House, 8th District here in Indiana. I'm running as a Republican because the Republican Party always has been a progressive party. It's only in the last 20 years that white supremacists have sought to take it over. We can't let them do that. We need a law passed in Indiana that prohibits a corporate entity that is a political party from making itself closely held, or rather making its rules such that it can't be taken over by anybody else. Christo-fascists have hold of the Indiana Republican Party. I'm running to try and get rid of that group or that legal ability to place a stranglehold on liberty. Because they might call themselves sons of liberty, or they use liberty and freedom in all the names of what they do. They're not about liberty. They're about fascism. And we can talk about fascism later, because we only, if we lose this next election, meaning the people, we might not be able to talk about fascism anymore. We won't be able to talk about anything but what they want us to. Oh, and you people who are marching downtown with the guns, take that. I'm Mark Small, civil discourse now, very civil. I only cussed a little bit. Take care. Peace, love, happiness.